Hi, my name is Krista, and I'm founder and CEO of Pop Doctors into Light Resources. We provide hope, inspiration, education, and resources to those who have mental illnesses and their family and friends. Today we have Sarah with us today, and she is a licensed marriage and family therapist who provides support to individuals, families, and couples. She has a special passion for working with children and their parents. Sarah also enjoys working one-on-one with adolescents and adults. She also leads two psychoeducational groups called Self-Care and Emotions in Me. So thank you so much for having me. And so let's dig in. So
Sure.
tell us more about the groups that you lead.
Sure. Well, Krista, I've been a therapist working with clients now for more than 10 years. And what I've found is there's some people that I've interacted with that really benefit from therapy services, but some people are not really ready for the in-depth look at their personal history and things that are going on for them, but they still might benefit from the skills and the knowledge that I have as a therapist. So I've developed some psychoeducational workshops and groups. And the idea behind them is they're short-term, they're time-limited. You don't have to share too much really personal about yourself, but I can share some of my knowledge about how we experience emotions in our body and how our brain comes into play with emotions. And I can also share my knowledge about coping skills that might be helpful. And the self-care group is more for adults. A lot of helping professionals might participate in that group, or parents who are struggling to take care of themselves because they take care of other people so much in their personal lives and their maybe in their work lives as well. The Emotions in Me is one of my favorite groups to do because it is for a child and a parent. And typically I work with children between the ages of 2 and 5 in that group and their parent. And we usually try to focus on one emotion each week and provide age appropriate education for the kids about the emotion, as well as learning and practicing coping skills so that parents can go home and feel like they are well equipped to support their children in developing a really healthy emotional life.
Great. So why is self-care so important into our lives, and especially our mental health?
Well, self-care is so essential because if we don't take the time to prioritize our own self-care, we can see the effects on us all over, right? We can start to feel physical ailments as a result of not taking time for ourselves. So that's headaches, stomach aches and pains, all of that stuff, right? So there's that physical piece, but there's also the emotional piece. When people don't take time for self-care, they can feel anxious, they can feel overwhelmed. Some people feel really depressed because they're not allowing themselves that space to just slow down and take a look at themselves and what do they need to be, taking care of their own well-being. Also, I can see relational impacts when people don't take time for self-care because, we get a little more irritable with people. We might get in arguments about little things that normally we wouldn't do if we had taken some time to just take care of ourselves.
Great. So about counseling, what is the goal of it?
I would personally say that the goal of counseling really depends on the client that's coming to see me. And I really try to work with whatever goals my clients bring to me. Having said that, I've noticed over the last 10 years kind of 3 categories of goals that people tend to present with. First, some people come because they're experiencing mental health symptoms that they don't want to experience anymore, and they want to understand why they're having these symptoms and what they can do to address the symptoms. So that would be someone who's feeling really anxious and it's interfering with their daily life, or maybe they're feeling really depressed, or maybe really irritable and it's affecting their relationships. And they come and it's okay, this is what's going on for me, I want to fix it, and then we kind of try to break it down and figure out why is this going on and what can we do to help you cope with those symptoms. So that's the first category. The second category of people that come to see me tend to be coming to address a specific situation that has caused them stress or distress. So let's say maybe parents are getting divorced. So then the kids will come see me to kind of process that experience and kind of understand it. Or maybe someone's, really dissatisfied with their job and they're trying to figure out like what are the next steps, and they might use counseling to kind of think through that and process it and figure out what they want to do. So that's my second category that I see. The third category I tend to see is relational problems. So either like a couple or a family who feels like they're disconnected, or there's lots of fighting, or they just can't communicate and they want to work on the relationship goals. So really those, I feel like they're somewhat three very distinct types of people that come with different goals, but I think there's also a lot of overlap there as well.
So what would you recommend to an individual such as a child or adolescent who is experiencing their parents getting divorced?
Well, the first thing I would say to the child or adolescent is remember that your parents will still love you. That's one of the things that especially younger kids start to worry about when they find that their parents are getting divorced. They start to worry that their parents aren't going to love them anymore. So that's one of the first messages I work with kids on. Your parents will still love you even if they are not in a relationship. I also work with kids and adolescents on not taking on too much responsibility themselves, as that's another thing that kids often will do is blame themselves. So I want kids to understand there's nothing they could have done to make their parents not get divorced. It's not their fault that their parents are getting divorced, and really try to alleviate any guilt that they are experiencing. The third thing I would really work with kids and adolescents on is finding someone that they can talk to. I don't want kids to feel like they have to stuff their feelings down. But when their parents are getting divorced, sometimes their parents are not the ones that they feel the most comfortable talking to, because they worry about making mom or dad sad, or making mom and dad worried, and they feel like mom and dad already have so much else going on with the divorce. So sometimes I work with kids on like, okay, what are the other supportive adults in your life that you could talk to? Do you have an aunt or an uncle, or maybe an older cousin that would be an appropriate person to turn to, maybe a therapist like myself, or a school counselor, and just, I think most parents are willing to get their child connected with an adult, and we just want to give kids the space to talk about whatever they're feeling, and then we can better support them in giving them tools to cope with the changes that they're experiencing.
Great. So if a person is experiencing some sort of guilt or anger, what would you recommend to do?
I think really when someone's experiencing guilt and anger, what we need to do is get at what's underlying those feelings of guilt and anger. Usually there's something that's happened that might be contributing, or some messages that people are telling themselves, especially related to guilt, that they're kind of like telling themselves over and over again, and sometimes those messages are not accurate or helpful. So I think the first thing is really being honest with yourself about what's gone on in the past that might be contributing to where you're at now, and then from there we can work on some kind of skills to cope with guilt and challenge inappropriate guilt, as well as anger too, and coping skills of what are healthy ways to deal with frustration when you have it.
How can a person with a history of trauma recover from the event?
That's a really complicated question, I think, Krista, and I think it depends, like, and it varies, in general from person to person. But I will say that in order to really take a deeper look at the trauma, I think a person needs to be in a safe place. So we really, that's the first thing that we need to do is create a safety plan, make sure they're in a safe place, that there's not ongoing trauma that's happening, and then creating a safe place where they can process the trauma, whether that's in therapy with me, or there's other types of therapists that do like EMDR therapy or trauma-focused CBT. It's really finding the right fit for that person where they're going to feel comfortable and safe taking a look at that trauma and processing what they've experienced and how that's affected them, what emotions they have, what types of thoughts they might have about themselves and the world and other people as a result of that trauma. And then also, again, coming back to coping skills, because when you're working through trauma, a lot of times it comes back as, intrusive memories or maybe nightmares or intense anxiety. So you need some skills to manage that piece of it too.
So how can a family implement a set of rules and boundaries?
That I love that question. That's a really good question. I usually recommend that families work together to come up with the rules and boundaries for their family. And that usually, if it's appropriate, I would recommend including the kids in that discussion. And I would kind of try to start simple. We don't want to overwhelm the kids in our lives with 20 rules if you've never had any, clear rules and boundaries in your family. So maybe starting with 3 rules, and then you can add to them as you go. But I think it's helpful to brainstorm, maybe like have a little family meeting and brainstorm, and put the rules in words that kids will understand, right? Because we want to make sure that they really get it. It's not really fair to hold someone to a rule that they have no idea about. And I like to kind of write out rules and have a list and hang it up somewhere, like maybe in your kitchen, on your fridge, or your dining room, where people can kind of check in with it. And if you have really little ones, sometimes it's nice to have like a little picture that goes along with the rule too if they can't read the rule.
So lastly, what would you recommend to a parent who needs a boost in self-confidence?
That is a wonderful question. I love working with parents so much. And I think nowadays parents struggle so much because there's messages all around us about what we should be doing or how we should be doing things better. And parents worry that they're not doing enough. But so the first thing I would say is trust yourself, right? Yeah. You know your child. You know yourself. You know your instincts are usually pretty right on. And if there's an area where you're feeling lacking, there is a lot of information out there in the world, right, that you can gather. I always tell parents that I think it's awesome if you can have like a mantra that you tell yourself. So like a positive statement, like I'm a good enough mom, or I love my kids. So then when you start to doubt yourself, you have that positive statement about yourself that you can go to and be like, okay, yep, I'm struggling with that, but here's this awesome thing about me as a mom or a dad, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take an action to get some more information. But I do think that connecting yourself with other parents too is a really important thing, and supportive parents who will cheer you on and know the ups and down struggles of being a parent as well.
Great, so thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
And you can subscribe to my channel to look at some other interviews with different mental health professionals.
Thanks, Krista.
Thanks.